This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Welcome to the CJ Moneyway Show podcast, the podcast show where we unlock potential one dream at a time. Today, we have another guest whose journey is truly worth hearing. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the Moneyway experience.
What's up, my good people? Welcome to the CJ Moneyway Show in association with Believe Entertainment, the podcast that brings you stories behind its success. Today, we have a special treat for our listeners. Well, it was the dynamic duo, but we have Bruce Tate, author of the #1 best-selling book, currently away. Welcome to the show, Bruce. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great.
Hey,
so I'm a #1 bestseller now, huh?
Hey, man. Hey, they say those things does not speak them as they were. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, we speaking out a #1 bestseller right now.
All right. Speak it out, brother.
Hey, so Bruce, man, tell me a little bit about yourself and about your background.
Yeah, my name is Bruce Tate, and I am a programmer. I'm in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and sometimes I'm a captain, right? And we get to talk about that part of myself today.
Okay. Captain of what?
So we took a long voyage on a pretty tiny boat, a 30-foot boat, around the whole eastern United States.
Mm-hmm.
This boat was called a Ranger Tug, and this trip was about just kind of settling down while COVID was all happening to us, right?
Mm-hmm. So, Bruce, tell us, man, you co-authored the book, Currently Away, a book about your incredible journey. What was the inspiration behind writing a memoir?
Yeah, so I've been a technical author for a long time. I've got 15 books to my name, and this was the first time I've written about anything other than technology.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened was my wife and I found ourselves kind of depressed. And as we were kind of going through that, we'd never gone through anything like 2020. And I thought COVID was going to kill me. And she thought it was going to kill me too, right? So I was high risk. And she said, why don't we do something different? Why don't we make this COVID quarantine in a smaller house with a bigger back porch, right?
Yeah.
So we've lived on this river for a long time, on the Tennessee River.
Mm-hmm.
And we see all these boats going by and never kind of imagined ourselves on one. But she said, well, that's pretty quarantined, right? It's like you're isolated by all this water and stuff. And we can imagine our life a different way. And so after we took this journey, a lot of people asked us about what it was like and the people that we met and what was going on at the same time. Because all this stuff was happening in the world, right? Ukraine was being invaded. Mm-hmm. We had this COVID pandemic happening. And yet we're taking this long boat journey kind of to, I don't know, I don't want to be dramatic and say to save our own lives, but to save our souls a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So people asked about it. And, I'd never done this kind of a thing, written this kind of a book before.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, let's do that. And so we wrote about it to tell other people about the journey.
So, Bruce, let me ask you, man. So before embarking on this journey, did you already have an idea to write a book, or did the inspiration come while you were on the road?
Yeah, it came much, much later. We were probably about 3/4 of the way through our journey. I write a lot of books, and it's not always easy, right?
Yeah.
I talk about writing a book like running a marathon. You just have to put one foot in front of another, right? And you have to do it, if it's a travel memoir, it's 90,000 words. So you have to do that 90,000 times, right?
Yeah.
And it's hard. And there are people that can doubt you. There are, I doubt myself. So you can't take this kind of endeavor on lightly. So I wanted to think about it before I decided to put the words to paper.
Mm-hmm.
But so many people asked me about the trip and what it was like. And they enjoyed talking to me about it, that I said, well, there's a story that other people want, and there's a story that I want to tell. So I just started writing it down.
Yeah, going on a journey like that and the things that you guys endure, that is something worth talking about. And I do understand what you mean at times where, sometimes you might want to write something that then you second guess yourself and you doubt yourself. And then sometimes we had this thing called writer's block, but I'm glad you went through, man, and got this book done. Like we say, there's #1 bestseller out there. So let me ask you, Bruce, man. What motivated both of you to take on the Great Loop journey together? A 6,000-mile adventure along the coast, the coast and the coast, Gulf and the Atlantic coast. I know you said that it was during the pandemic and everything, but how did you guys get together and say, you know what, this is what we just gonna do?
So I mentioned being depressed, and I can remember the second that I walked down the stairs and I saw my wife reading this book. It's like everything is gray. We're all kind of sad and didn't know if I was going to live through this pandemic. And I know that there were a lot of people like that. Mm-hmm. But I came down the stairs and my wife was reading this book called From What Is to What If. And I said, that's weird, right? Because we've been in this rut for a while. And I said, that sounds kind of like hope. And then 2 weeks later, I walked down the stairs and she was reading this book called The Great Loop Experience. And what had happened is that she read the first book and she said, I need to imagine my life the way that I want it, not the way that it's not this thing that's crushing me right now. And she imagined a way out. She imagined that we were going to go through the pandemic on this boat and taking this trip. And so she bought a book and started researching the idea of the Great Loop. And this is a 6,000-mile trip around the eastern United States, right? It's something that you don't take on lightly.
Yeah.
But I had a job. Since I teach technology, I can do that from anywhere, right? As long as I have an internet connection, I can do it. So she read this book, and then we started talking about the idea of taking on a journey like that. And we had some old advisors as friends. And we said, should we take this trip in a couple of years? And they said, no. And we said, no. They said, you should go now because you never know if your life circumstances can change. And you have, everything is laid out for you, right? You have the financial opportunity. You have the motivation to go. You should go. And you're sad and you need to break yourself out of that. So that's what we did.
Let me ask you, Bruce, man, you brought something up. You said because you teach technology and as long as you got internet connection, you can work from just about anywhere. How was the internet connection on this small boat, man, journeying 6,000 miles? Did you ever lose service or anything or was it smooth sailing, man?
We did lose service a couple of times. So now the trip is built to where you're in port most of the time. So 2 days you're in port and then you're underway a day. 2 days in port. So we saw a lot of the country. So we're visiting places, but there were places where we lost internet service and there are places that were kind of spooky. So like when we were in the Everglades, we could look down and you could see the sharks in the water. And, there's no service, right? And, you look around, maybe there's a sailboat anchored way over there, but we were on our own, But most of the time we had really, really good internet. We had this system that we would actually put 2 phone cards in it, believe it or not. And one was AT&T and one was Verizon. As long as we could get one of the 2, we were good to
go. Yeah, that was smart right there, man. That was smart. So, Bruce, let me ask you, man, can you share some of the most memorable experiences that you encountered along the way? What moment truly stood out to you?
Yeah, so there's a couple of them. Let me start with one that, so when we left, the river wasn't in flood, but it was really, really high, higher than we'd ever seen in Chattanooga. So we live on the river and it's maybe, we can look down and it's a big, long sloping bank. And that big, long sloping bank was almost gone. And then we could look outside 2 days before we were going to go. And there were these big trees, just floating down the river. We're saying, we're going to be out in that. Just kind of questioning ourselves, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, we're going down this river and it's really, really cold because we didn't leave when you're supposed to in the fall. We left in January. And the weather was good until about the day that we left. And then it kind of got really, really cold. And we had a lot of cold and rain. And this happened week upon week upon week. And so it's really stressful because we had all these trees and all this debris floating on down by. There was a boat that sank in the lock like 2 weeks before. So we, pulling up to this lock, which is like a big bathtub, and you could see up on the edges. And then we saw the top of this boat. And then we kind of look, you see a lot of boats, so doesn't catch your eye. And then you look again and said, wait a minute, that thing is up in the parking lot. What went on there? And it had a big hole in it. It had actually sunk in the lock. So we saw a lot of things like this. And so it made the start of the trip exciting but tense, right?
Yeah.
And then we got to the coast, and we thought that the coast was going to be, okay, now I can shed the winter jacket. We just throw it in the trash, right? We're not going to need it for a year or something.
Yeah.
And that didn't happen, right? We got all this kind of rain and cold, and we said, I'm in Florida, and I started this trip. And so anyway, we pulled out of some marina, and there's this warship that passed us, and my wife was driving, and it just knocked the tar out of us, right? So this big wave just rocked us back and forth, and things are falling off the shelves and rattling on the floor. And my wife is kind of shaking. And then, I said, would you like me to drive? And she said, yeah. So we had this code. We had this code that said, perhaps I could be of some assistance.
Yeah.
That meant, would you like me to drive? And she said, yeah. And so I kind of started going a little bit faster to where the boat was starting to take off, but it wasn't really wide open yet.
Yeah.
But at this speed, it makes a big, big wave, right? And that kind of settled us down a little bit. And so then my wife said, wait, Bruce, there are dolphins. I said, dolphins? And then I see them kind of come out towards the boat. And then we had this really careful procedure where you hand the steering wheel from one person to the other. I didn't do any of that stuff. I just ran to the back of the boat. And I said, dolphins! And so I'm staring at them. And, CJ, I tell you, over the next 40 minutes, these dolphins, a whole pod of dolphins were playing behind the boat.
Wow.
And when I looked to see them at first, I looked to the front of the boat where they almost always are, right? I saw nothing, right? So I'm looking. And I turn around angry, I'm never going to see any dolphins. And one had jumped up and almost hit me in the face.
Whoa.
And so they were so close, maybe a foot or two away. And that moment, I just melted, right? It said everything. There was this overwhelming peace that washed over me. I said, everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
It's going to be okay.
Man, you know what, Bruce, I'm going to be honest with you, man. Once I heard, for me, if it was me, that it was a ship that had sunk a week before, or a couple of weeks before, that journey might have been over with for me, man. I might have been a little too nervous to fulfill that 6,000-mile journey, man. But kudos to you guys right there. And so, with that being said, besides the beginning that you guys endured and made it through, what were some of the toughest challenges you faced during this adventure? Were there moments when you thought about giving up besides that point?
Yeah, so there were a couple. One of the moments was 3 days after we had started. Mm-hmm. And, we didn't know what we needed to know about weather or anything like that. And we really wanted to, right? We wanted to know, what was safe. But we thought, gosh, we're on this river system. And in the river system, most of the winds are kind of protected, right? Mm-hmm. The river's kind of going around and turning. And, we were in a pretty big, pretty heavy boat, about 7,000 pounds. And so we weren't really worried about what the water could do to us on that particular river. Mm-hmm. And we should have been, right? So we got out there, the wind was about 25 miles an hour. And it turns out that if the wind blows right straight down a line that's pretty long, and this is the first long straight section of the river, and the wind was going right down that channel. Mm. And like I said, the waves were higher than usual because the current was higher than usual. Mm-hmm. And the currents, so these waves started and they were 2 feet high. I mean, if you kind of put your hand up, that's pretty big, right?
Yeah.
And so my wife and I looked at each other and kind of, laughed a little bit nervously and said, we got the right boat. And the waves were kind of cut right in the bow and they were shooting off to the side. We're saying, man, boy, did I pick myself a good boat, right?
Yeah.
And then a couple of minutes later, the waves are 4 feet high, and we're kind of laughing nervously. And Maggie starts to, she records everything. So she said, I want to get this moment. And so she started recording. And then the waves grew to 6 feet high, the highest waves that we saw on our whole trip. And we said, we have to be off of this river, right? Yeah. And so we saw these red buoy and a green buoy. And basically, when you go through that, that's where you're supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And so it was off to the side of the river, and I turned the wheel all the way to the side, and this big waves coming into crash. And my wife looked at me as if she was going to ask me, is it Tuesday? She said, hey, are we going to die? I didn't answer that question, right? So, so I turned up, and then I went between those two buoys, and the river slowed us down and slowed us down and slowed us down, and we hit something on the bottom, not too hard. And then we cut on through. But it turns out that there was like a layer of mud that keeps most boats out, but we were able to get over it in those waves, and because of the high water. And we were able to get out and into this marina. And this was a summer-only marina, so we weren't even supposed to be there, right? So as soon as we got in there, we tied our boat up, and everybody said, hey, welcome. And how'd you get in here? How'd you get in here? Well, you're not going to be able to leave tomorrow or till June, really. And it's January, right? So we thought our loop was over right then.
So, like their curiosity, they was curious on how you guys got there and couldn't get out because you ain't supposed to be there till the summertime. I'm curious too, Bruce. Which part of this journey, was it starting the journey or finishing it, was the most difficult? Like, how did the ending compare to the beginning?
Which part was the most difficult? That's a really tough question, because when you have a journey that long, the journey itself is difficult, right? It's just hard. Yeah. There's a lot. I'm a programmer. I have nothing to do with engines, and I found myself, with my hands all the way up to the shoulders in grease and in the engine. Yeah. Because I had to, right? Yeah. Because, you gotta change the oil, and this was during COVID and there weren't mechanics available. I found myself doing the same thing with the septic system, right? With all of these systems on board, we found ourselves alone and just completely isolated. We had COVID. I lost my brother during this trip. We lost our dog. Yeah, thanks. But we were able to deal with these circumstances in some of the most beautiful places on earth. And we got to really kind of shake loose of what we were wondering that was going to happen to us next. And we got to make the next thing happen to us, right? We got to really open up and live for a little while. And so I would say it was really, really hard, almost all of it. And it was really, really rewarding. But I want to talk about one particularly hard moment. We were coming into a place called Marco Island, and this was in Florida. And it's a very, very wealthy place. And I had some Ukrainian friends. And we had heard on the radio that Ukraine had been invaded by Russia. Then there was all this political chatter after that happened about, I didn't really understand what that was about. I just knew my friends were refugees, and they were coming across, bridges, and we were wondering if certain people in our community were okay. And people were making sport of this in this town, and it just was really, really painful. And so I remember being in one of the most beautiful nights on the trip. There are all these Mediterranean houses, maybe 10 million each. And this glow coming through the window, and you hear the waves slapping on the side, just kind of in a rhythm that should have been great sleeping weather, right? And I remember the breeze kind of blowing through, and there's this sound that the shrimp make when they crunch on the side of your boat. It sounds almost like wires crackling, right? Like electricity or something like that. Yeah. But I couldn't think about any of those things. I just put my back to my wife, and I just cried. The first time on the trip, I just cried because my friends were oppressed, right? So yeah, that's a moment that really strikes me as a difficult one.
Man, yeah, I hate that you had to endure some losses on your journey. I know that was kind of hard to endure because you're trying to set a goal and do some things, and then you can't turn back to, can't turn back from where you at to go deal with it. And so, yeah, man, so I feel for you in that aspect, but kudos again to you guys for enduring, man, and finishing this journey off. So, Bruce, let me ask you, man, being a programmer and a CEO, as someone who strives on the venture, how did you approach the planning and execution of this journey? Or shall I say, did you find your backgrounds influencing your roles during the trip?
Yes. I mean, so this is a big deal. There was a moment on the trip when we were kind of by ourselves and with one other boat, and we talked. We were about 3/4 of the way around. By then, it was clear we were going to finish. And we talked to each other about how difficult the job was that we did and what we were able to do. And you can do it without planning, right? So I would say that the two things that I learned as a programmer are, the first thing is that you have to plan for the worst, right? And we did. So one of the things that we did was we carried all the spare parts that we would need, and two of a lot of the spare parts that we would need. Before we even left port, right? Because we were going to be out, and all these manufacturing shortages were locking down marine supplies at the time.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I learned as a programmer is that you can't plan for everything, and your plans need to be flexible, right? So there are places in the loop where we'd have to have a rough plan for the next month or so, right? And then it really got down to it day to day. We didn't know if we were going to leave port in the morning. And so we had to basically let go of our kind of American style of saying, now, I want it, I'm going to go, and just wait on the weather. Wait. If you like a place, stay a place. If you like a person, hang with a person. And if it's not working, just kind of move on. And so having that kind of mindset really helped us make it around and get into like a life rhythm and a flow. It was really a lovely thing.
Yeah, like you said, I like how you put that. You can't plan for everything, but you do have to have a rough plan and then a plan after a plan to make another plan, because you never know what may happen, and especially if you haven't experienced certain things, and you may have an idea what you want to do, but once you get there, it could be something totally different than what you expected. So it's like, nah, Maggie, I don't think that plan right there gonna work. So
yeah, like what? Like once we didn't even know how to tie up our boat. We got to saltwater.
Yeah.
And we saw these things called tides, and we were thinking, what's a tide? The water comes up, the water comes down. And on the river, our dock goes up and down with the tides. We can tie it really tight, right?
Yeah.
And if you tie really tight on the ocean, when the tides are coming up and down and that dock's not moving, well, your boat's either going to be held at the bottom or the top, and that's not going to work out very well, right?
Wow.
So you have to learn out how to make it loose and how to cross the lines, and how to keep the boat close enough to the shore without keeping the lines too tight, right? So there are all these little things that we had to learn with each new geography, new weather patterns, tides, salt water, fresh water. It's like, what does that do to your gear, right? All that stuff. You're right. We had to flex.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Good that there was two smart people on this boat that can adapt and get things together and working together. So let me ask you a question, Bruce. Yep. How has writing currently away shaped your perspective on life and the world? And did it change your outlook on what's truly important?
Yeah, there's a thing that we were struggling with before this book and before this voyage. It's that we are learning new ways in this country to hate each other.
Yeah.
Right? We just do. It's if I don't have the same background that you do, if I don't have the same everything as you do, we're being taught by others to hate each other. And one of the things that we learned on this trip is that we don't have to, right? That we can look into what we have in common. And that was really a beautiful thing. We had this couple that we were with just around Miami in a town called Hillsborough. And we were having these political conversations, and my wife started asking these political questions. And I'm thinking, how do I get this pen back into this hand grenade? Right?
Yeah.
Because it's not going to go, right? And, and, then we would just laugh and then we would start talking about the loop again. Right? Because we had this common thing. We had this thing in common. And since the trip, we've been thinking we have something else in common. We have our humanity in common. We have an innate curiosity about people that we didn't have as deeply before. And it's a really, really special thing for us. And I hope that we carry it the further that we get away from this trip.
With that being said, like you say, with the couple in Florida and you try to put the pin back in the grenade. Let me ask you a question, Bruce. As a couple, what impact has this shared experience had on your relationship? Did it bring you closer, or were there moments like that one with the grenade, or was it moment of tension?
Well, there were moments of tension, but the thing about it is, in 290 square feet in this tiny little boat, you don't go to bed mad. You can't go take a walk. There's nowhere to take a walk. So we learned to stay on top of we learned to work it out. And that's marriage, right? It's like every new adventure, we have to learn to work it out. And, on the trip, we were keenly aware that this relationship was a permanent thing. And so if we were going to be walking away from it, then we had to invest in it. And the other thing that happened was that we learned to appreciate each other for the things that we brought to the trip, right? Like, I mentioned the time that I put my wife on my hand on Maggie's shoulder, and I said, perhaps I could be of some assistance, right? Well, she got to do the same thing to me, right? So we're coming into New York, and there's this special day called Fleet Week, right? Okay. And in Fleet Week, all the battleships and aircraft carriers and Coast Guard ships, they're coming into New York Harbor. And we arrived in New York that day, right? So if you can imagine all these military boats with all the military space that they're supposed to have around them, squeezing down 80% of the Hudson River, right? And we had the last little bit for all the traffic of New York to go through. All the ferries and all these like massive boats, all these, it was all like right crammed into this place. And we got pulled over by the cops twice, right? So these military boats pulled up to us. Harbor police pulled up to us and said, go over there. And they're each pointing at each other, right? You go into that space, you go in that space. I don't know if they were messing with us or not, but I was about to curl up into a little ball and lie on the floor. And I feel my hand on the shoulder. And Maggie said, perhaps I could be of some assistance. Because she knew that I was just kind of full. And I said, yeah, that'd be good. And so CJ, she promoted me to head photographer. She said, go take pictures. I said, but I can. She said, go take pictures. So I did.
Oh, so she had to take control of that situation. I say, get your butt off the ground there, Bruce. Hey, so Bruce, let me ask you a question, man. So now that Currently Away is out, do you have any future projects or adventures lined up? Or could there be a sequel or perhaps a new endeavor dealing with new book?
Yeah, I've been thinking about retiring into writing, and I'd really like to do that. And one project that we're thinking about is biking the Erie Canal, because we didn't get to boat down it, but that there were these biking trails. And so it'd be a really fun thing to bike all 350 miles or so of that canal and just stop and meet people and interview all these people that have lived on this canal all their lives, right? And so we could kind of mix in, like Currently Away, right? Some of it's funny stories and how we almost ran into the dock in the first 20 minutes of the boat. And, some is about the deeper stories, like losing my friends in Ukraine. But I'd really like to write a book like that about that part of the country.
Hey, but Bruce, I think I should have asked you this question before this question. So what do you hope from the book that's currently out, Currently Away? What do you hope readers will take away from your memoir especially regarding the experiences and lessons learned from embarking on such an adventure?
Well, two things. The first thing is I hope people will have the audacity to dream, right? It was really, really easy for us to sit down and just waste away in Chattanooga during the pandemic and just keep doing that and doing that one day into the next and let life happen to us. And it was a dream to reimagine what quarantine could look like, to put us on a boat instead of in our condo, right? So the first thing is to dream. And the second thing is that person over there, they're human too. And they're curious too. And it's okay to have conversations with them and to disagree. Just when you're done talking about beating each other up over, whatever the politics are, come back to your common humanity and interact like people. Forbearance is a great skill that we've kind of lost in this country. And I hope that this book will help people get some of that back.
Yeah, man. Because Lord knows we need a lot of healing in this country, like you was alluding to earlier and like what you said right now. So I only got one more question for you, Bruce, man. And I appreciate you taking the time out your day to come on the Moneyway Show and share your experiences. So, but where can we find the book at? On Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and what are your social media handles?
Yeah, so on Barnes & Noble and on Amazon, the book is called Currently Away. It's available on both. And hey, like you're saying, let's speak it into a #1 bestseller, right?
That's right, speak it into
audience. Let's go out, get that book.
Yeah.
And so you can find me at Red Rapids on Twitter, or I guess it's called X now, whatever.
Yeah.
Or whatever that man renamed it.
Yeah, whatever you named it to.
Yeah. And on Instagram, we are Currently the Boat.
Currently the Boat. Okay.
Yeah. And love for you to read it and let us know what you think.
Yeah. You heard it right here. Currently Away. Go grab the book on Amazon. Go grab it on Barnes & Noble. You say on Instagram, your handles is what? Currently
the Boat.
Currently the Boat. Hey, follow them on Instagram. Hey, so Bruce, man, I just got one more question for you. Finally, what advice would you give to couples who are considering a similar journey or embarking on a big adventure together like you guys did?
Go as soon as you have the circumstances, as soon as your life will make it happen. Your circumstances can change, but nobody ever regretted actually following their heart, following their dreams. It's a go.
You heard it right here. Just go. And it's something too that Bruce said earlier, and he keeps saying it. So I think that's a vital part, because that's something that I'm really big on too. Dream big, and don't never let anybody kill your dreams. If God gave you a dream, the dream is for you, and it's really not for nobody else. If they don't understand it, then oh well. Dream big and go for what you know. Hey, Bruce, man, is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience before we leave out of here, man?
That's it. Thank you so much for this conversation. I've enjoyed being with you today.
Oh, man, I appreciate you coming on, Bruce. Hey, so go get the book that's currently out right now. Currently Away by Bruce and Maggie Tate. Hey, check out their 6-mile journey across the Gulf and Atlantic coast. Hey, exciting trip. Got some good stuff in there because the man aiming to heal America. And that's what we need right now. You have been listening to the CJ Moneyway Show with your boy CJ Moneyway and Bruce Tate. Hey, we out of here. Peace.
Thank you for listening to the CJ Moneyway Show. Don't forget to share this episode with your friends, leave a comment, and drop a review. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday and Friday for more inspiring journeys. Who knows? Your story might be next.